Good evening, everyone. We are pleased to open our second webinar of JPW. We are broadcasting from the Masorti offices in Jerusalem, and I would like to thank Neria Knafo, the director of JPW, and Emily Levy-Shochat, the chairperson of JPW, for putting together this program, as well as Tami Gottlieb, our webmaster, who is working on the production. We have a unique opportunity tonight to get to hear from, to interview one of the, I would say, one of the most impressive young politicians that we have today in Israel. It would be interesting to hear his part of the story as a member of the coalition in the previous Knesset, and as one who was very much involved in the functioning of the previous coalition, and to see what happened now and what brought him to a very courageous decision on his part to vote against what looked like back then as the coming coalition, and not to join the Prime Minister Netanyahu's decision to have another elections. Before we get there, just a little intro of where are we politically in Israel now. Okay. Well, the big question that we are about to explore this evening is if indeed Israel's democracy is in one of its severe crises. These are the results of April 9th elections. And as you can see, we thought we have a clear answer regarding what does the Israeli public want. 65 MKs basically said that they would like to see Prime Minister Netanyahu continue to be Israel's prime minister. Well, it was the window of time of 21 days finished. The president gave Prime Minister Netanyahu another 14 days, and towards the end of the second term of Prime Minister Netanyahu to convene a coalition, it was quite obvious that we are about to see something that wasn't precedented in Israel's democracy ever before. Meaning, it's known that towards the end of the coalition negotiations, many parties or many groups are playing chicken with each other. No one thought that it would lead to what we are facing now. Avigdor Lieberman basically said to Prime Minister Netanyahu, if you are not committing for the IDF draft bill, I am not coming into your coalition. And a small party of 5 seats in the Knesset basically forced Prime Minister Netanyahu to do one of two things. One, to give back his mandate to President Flynn. It happened twice before in Israel's history with Shimon Peres and Tzipi Livni, or to do something that no one thought that he will do, and to work against the very basic instinct of every politician and to go again for elections. Not only him personally, but he was able to force the entire Knesset to vote for it. But the coalition negotiations was quite stunning because of declarations that Avigdor Lieberman shared with the public that we never heard before. He was talking very bluntly about the fact that he is for Jewish state but against halachic state. He said it more than once in more than one occasion. He even tweeted it, and it's something that makes you wonder. Well, he was a member of many coalitions before. How come in this coalition, in this particular time, he decided to speak to a value that his constituency, at least allegedly, would have supported him long ago? What happened? Avigdor Lieberman suddenly found that the issues of state and religion could be beneficiary for him as a politician. And 5 minutes before midnight on May 30th, 5 minutes before the mandate should have gone back to President Rivlin to be handed to another MK, the Knesset voted 74 in favor and 45 against to dissolve its term after just a few months, and the entire 120 MKs are going again for elections, when it's quite obvious that not all of them will be re-elected to the coming Knesset. One could say that it was a brave act on behalf of the Prime Minister, but in September we'll know if indeed he played his cards correctly and bravely. One thing that was clear, that when in Israel decided not to go with the flow. He did not vote against, but he decided not to come to the voting in the Knesset. 119 members of Knesset voted, yet Ro'i Folkman did not show up, meaning he did not support his party, Kulanu. You can see his bio. MK Ro'i Folkman is really impressive, not only as a politician, but also with a very impressive bio as a Wexner graduate and as one of the youngest MKs that had great influence during the previous Knesset. It looks like, at least for now, that he is considering, yet did not declare yet, to finish his political career, unless we will hear otherwise momentarily. And probably this is the right time to have Ro'i join us from his residence next to Jerusalem. Ro'i, are you with us?
Yeah, good evening, Izhar. And well, I didn't know you were expecting declarations, but I wouldn't count on too many declarations this evening anyway. שומעים אותי? Do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay, so I just said, Izhar, I don't want to disappoint you. I'm not planning of giving too many declarations this evening. I'm happy to have an open discussion on anything you want. Definitely complicated days today in Israel, especially today is a sad day. You hear me, Izhar?
Yes, I do hear you. I don't see you. Let me see if I can...
Because I see that the video is working. And just saying that it's especially sad day today, as Nechama Rivlin, the wife of the president of Israel, has passed away this morning. The funeral will take place tomorrow, and everyone today here in Israel is mourning Nechama Rivlin, of course. Generally speaking, difficult days in Israeli politics and Israeli public life.
Thank you, Ro'i. You are definitely right. This is something important to mention. Some technical issues before we start the conversation. If you want to ask questions, on the bottom of your screen, you have a chat button. You can click it, and then a window would open on the right side of your screen. You can write some questions, and we'll try to address at least a few of them during the talk. Let's start. Ro'i, a personal question that I'm sure that you deliberated with that evening, that Wednesday. How did you basically decide not to show up?
Well, I wouldn't make too much of a drama, although it became a bit unique because I was the only member of Knesset that didn't show up for the vote, because I didn't want to embarrass the coalition, but I could not vote to disperse the Knesset. I thought it was an irresponsible decision. I think even if there isn't any option beside the current coalition that is forming, I think the democratic way was to bring back the mandate to the president and say, well, we weren't successful until this point. Let's see if there are any other options, at least symbolically, even if nothing else could have happened. I thought it was an irresponsible move. You asked if Israeli politics is in crisis, and it's clear, because the first time in the 70 years history of Israel, we are having a second election, or we are dispersing the Knesset a month and a half after elections. The first time in the Israeli history that we'll have two elections in 1 year. It's a bad sign for stability, and definitely there is a crisis. I thought that even symbolically it would not be the right vote that day, and I couldn't join that vote.
but it was quite clear, and you knew it, that you will pay a heavy political price for it. It looks like you will not be put on the Likud list for the next elections, unlike your other friends from Kulanu.
Well, I don't know what will happen. Everything now in Israeli politics is in chaos. Things are still being discussed. I am the faction head of Kulanu. I, of course, discussed that and my opinion with the head of my party, the finance minister, Moshe Kahlon.
How did he react when you told him, listen, Moshe, I'm not coming this evening? What did he tell you?
Well, we have very close relations. He told me he thinks it's a mistake from my side. He understood why I've done it, and he accepted it. He didn't order me. It's if you wouldn't do that, something will happen. We have a very large respect to each other. He understood why I've done it, and we'll see what will happen next. Still, in our democracy, we are entitled to our own views, even if you pay the price sometimes.
So let's talk about values and paying the price. Quite a few times during this last government, we were corresponding and talking, and I know how influential you were in injunctions where you really made a difference and made some bills that were horrible less horrible, which is something that only if you're a member of a coalition you can do, and we have respect for that. But at the same time, you draw the line. You draw the line this time, but it was maybe too late to create a constituency that would support you more in a stronger way. If you would have drawn that line, that very special line to say, I cannot anymore, if you would have done it a few months or a year earlier, wouldn't it be wiser as a politician?
Well, first of all, we have talked about it quite a few times. I am, ideologically, I'm a right-wing politician, and I am a part of a right-wing coalition. I have told you, and I've wrote about it a few times, that I think the challenge in Israel today is what I call the hawkish liberals, meaning you need to find liberals within the right camp. Kulanu party, for my opinion, was part of that camp, meaning you can be a right-wing party that supports Netanyahu, but still not be against judicial oversight of the Knesset, and not pro-halacha state, and having a balanced attitude towards things that today in the Likud are hard to find. So, first of all, that's the fact, the political fact in Israel. The left will not be in power, and in my opinion, to a large extent, it's a good thing. The struggle in Israeli politics today is between hardline conservatives and moderates and liberals within the right camp, the right-wing camp in Israel. That's the only game on the field. So, as we spoke in the past, I'm a part of a coalition. It means compromise. It means compromises on kashrut. It means compromises on issues of other issues of state and religion. It meant compromising on other stuff in order to pass a lot of things, especially social and economical things, but also to balance other legislations that without us would be extreme. I would push one more point that it's important for our listeners to know. In Israel, we have the Likud in the coalition, the big party, and 4 or 5 small parties. Now, it's a mistake to think that the one who controls the agenda in Israel is the big parties. It's always the small parties. And the problem is that beside Kulanu, all the other parties in the Israeli coalition are sectorial parties, meaning they represent a small group. For example, Bezalel Smotrich represent 2 mandates of ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, something in the balance. And you have the Haredi Shas, the Haredi Yadut HaTorah, and you have Lieberman representing the new immigrants from Russia. These are, I respect these parties, have great people in them. We work. Sorry, do you hear me?
Yes, yeah. Now we can hear you.
These parties are sectorial. We were the only coalition party outside of the Likud that were talking generally to the public and looking on the wider picture of how to balance a balanced Israel, not to advocate only for one sectorial side. Now that's the game now in Israeli politics.
You did speak about it during the elections and before the elections, but dealing with the results of the election, it basically didn't work. There probably no constituency for moderate right-wingers that would support a party like Kulanu. So maybe for you as a politician, it's a dead end.
So first of all, it's hard to say because the elections weren't on any issue. The only issue that were pushed forward in the last elections were, are you pro-Netanyahu or against Netanyahu? That was the only issue. We weren't voting for social justice. We weren't voting for state and religion. We weren't voting for the judicial system. We have checked it again and again in surveys. And unfortunately, the entire agenda were kidnapped by this one issue. By the way, by both sides. It served Netanyahu and it served Gantz. They have done a terrible mistake, a rookie mistakes playing to this field. And the entire voting pattern was whether you support Netanyahu or not. And to be more nuanced, saying, yes, we can support Netanyahu, like my party, we can be a part of the coalition and we can be supportive to Netanyahu, but we want a balanced attitude towards the judicial system, yes, and we want a balanced attitude towards state and religions, yes, and we want a balanced attitude towards economic development and social justice. These issues were completely sidetracked. So
right, you're definitely right, but you also played a part in it. You said that you would not sit with Prime Minister Netanyahu if indeed he is indicted. And then after the elections, it looked to me that you changed the attitude, that you said, well, we don't have enough seats to back our principles, and therefore we will let go of them. And we will go into the coalition even if Prime Minister Netanyahu continues to be Prime Minister with an indictment.
Yeah, well, definitely that's not the case. Politics is about influence. It's not about, if you want to be right, you can write a paper. It's not about being right, it's about being influential. Now, we said, first of all, with our 4 mandates, we are not a balancing power. The coalition can be formed with us or without us. So that's not the case anymore because we were weakened dramatically. Now, we said, and I said personally, for me, it would be more important to influence dramatic changes within the Israeli legislative patterns between conservatives and liberalism in Israel, more than accepting a situation where we might sit in a coalition where Netanyahu, unfortunately, might be indicted. I said in my priorities, it would be more important to block changes in the Israeli constitution and constitutional legislation that will be tailor-made for this political situation. That is way more important to influence that when saying, well, maybe the price for that it will sit in a coalition after indictment of the prime minister. So that's the situation. It's not about principles, the way you influence and what do you think is more important, because I can be right and proud in myself and sit in the opposition and not influence at all. So that's the game.
Yeah. Something happened yesterday with the Israeli politics. Smotrich, as you mentioned before, had a declaration that he supports Medinat Halacha or some sorts of Medinat Halacha. And for the first time, there is a true issue on the table that is not Netanyahu. There is issue of principle that has to do with state and religion that now everyone is deliberating about. I'm sure that you are not supportive of Medinat Halacha. Yet the fact that the next coming coalition, if indeed the results of the elections would be similar to the ones we have now, it looks like that it will be a right-wing Haredi coalition with less ability of moderates like you to have any influence. It would increase, it would increase the political crisis, but it may change the nature of the state of Israel. Are you worried?
Yeah, first of all, it's not Smotrich that brought this issue to the table, it's the crisis, because Lieberman has created a big crisis with forming the coalition, saying we will not allow the Haredi parties to control the agenda. So it started there, and that's why the nerves on these issues are now exposed. It's not because what Smotrich, that's what was and is are his opinions, and they are known. It's not like a big surprise for anyone. But the thing is clear. Out of 65 mandates in the Israeli potential coalition currently today, around 21, 22 and more mandates are Haredi and or Orthodox, modern Orthodox, more connected, Hardali. And it's without counting many members of the Likud that support that agenda, without being part of those men. So I would say around 40% of the coalition are highly ultra-Orthodox to large extent. So that's the case at this point. There is no political power in the coalition beside a faction in the Likud that usually cannot afford pushing back because they know that their silver bullet for government is giving everything to the Haredi. And the only ones that are left being more, I would say, liberals in the Israeli political agenda and coming coalitions are Kulanu and Lieberman. We are the only ones. So,
but you will not run independently in the coming elections. You will run part of the Likud.
That's a valid option. It's still not finalized, but even so, we still have our liberal agendas within the Likud. The question will be, first of all, whether in the Likud could be a stronger liberal agenda, which was not the case in the last 4 years, and also whether we'll be balancing powers that can join a coalition to push for a more liberal democratic agenda, to pushing back to other agendas, sectorial agendas.
If I hear you correctly, you are calling for a unity government in the next Knesset. Basically, you do not believe that the current coalition should continue.
No, I definitely believe I'm not calling a unity per se. I'm calling a more balanced attitude. I thought the forming of blue and white was a huge political mistake, a very arrogant mistake. For 4 years, you know that, I carried on my back with my party a lot of the effort to balance those more extremist tendencies in the Israeli politics. Now, after these very hard 4 years, I said, come and join us in under the stretcher, as we say in Hebrew. So come and join us and help us. And they formed a big, eclectic party with the vision that they can win, which was never the case. They became very arrogant with the way they formed themselves. And in the end, they could not join the coalition. And again, I said, it's not all about Netanyahu. It's about a balanced coalition. And I still think the game for the next term will be, can we form a balanced coalition? A balanced coalition, meaning other parties and members of a coalition that can balance the extremists.
Roy, I would like to ask you something that usually politicians find unique ways of not answering, but I will try. If you would draw a red line for the next coalition, something that you, Roy Folkman, with your set of values, would never support, what would it be?
So it's not that we don't like to answer red line questions. It's, first of all, it's problematic media-wise, because when you draw a red line, then exactly that's what happened. Like they call you, the media attacks you again and again on these issues and attacks you. So first of all, that's why we don't declare red lines. But we've said a few times, we are against personal legislation, meaning adjusting the legislative system of Israel for the situation of one person, even if it's the most important one, the prime minister. So that's for me a red line. I would not support personal legislation, a legislation that is tailor-made for the needs of the prime minister. I'm a partner to discuss any reform. And I told you again, I'm telling our crowd and listeners here today, Israel democracy will change. Demography is changing. Attitudes to Israel as a liberal democracy is changing, and it will change. We had yesterday Jerusalem Day, the independence of Jerusalem, the 67 war. And we said, and I said in my speech in the Knesset, what you see in Jerusalem today is what Israel will be in 20 years. And you know why? What you see in Jerusalem? Well, a third of the population is Arabs. And from the Jewish population, a third is secular, a third is religious, and a third is ultra-Orthodox, approximately. Now, That's the situation. That will be the situation in Israel in 20 years. So we face changes. Now, the question will be whether it will be a hardlining, conservative, more very orthodox state, or can we find a more balanced attitude? And so I'm a pro-reform and I'm pro-discussion. I'm not against the ultra-Orthodox. I was always a partner. But we need to find a balanced way to do that change. And unfortunately, because of the current political situation of the prime minister, we have very small latitude for discussion, unfortunately.
So, you talked about Jerusalem as a microcosmos that maybe one day will be the entire Israel. I must tell you that I hope that you are wrong on that, but who knows? You were privileged to spend a year in Boston. You have an MBA from Harvard. You participated in the Wexner program. You know world Jewry. You know North American Jewry. What did you take from that year, and how did it bring you back to Israel a little different?
Well, first of all, these 2 points are similar. One is that we believe that we are the center of the world, and everything in Israel is so unique. Even our policy problems. I came from being an advisor to the mayor of Jerusalem. I am a policy expert, and that was my profession. And you see that problems that we face are similar in many places in the world, and you learn to open your eyes. It's the same when you meet American Jewry, of course. When you see there is a wide spectrum of ways to be a part of the Jewish community, you can be way more open to express being Jewish, and it's clear that it doesn't has to be black and white and clear-cut solutions, although in Israel it's quite often the case. As someone who came from Jerusalem, I know, for example, that being religious is a wide spectrum. I live today personally in a small village near Jerusalem that is a combined community between Orthodox and secular. And I came to live in this place by choice. I thought that the separation between secular and religious Israel is a catastrophe. So I'm working on it in my personal life. We have a joint school, a youth movement together, and we are doing those experiments in Israel in my personal life as well. But definitely, we have a chance for moderation, but for being more moderate in our attitude towards issues of belief and in other issues as well. But I want to point another small thing before you continue in your questions. We spoke about political influence. And there is something else that is happening in the last 15 years in Israel that I don't know if our viewers and listeners are aware of. A lot of money is being poured from very hard-lining conservatives in the United States and elsewhere to change the Israeli political system. Now, what is happening in the last 10 and 15 years is, as the federations and the more moderates and liberals in the United States said, that's not our goal. The slogan was, we will never intervene in Israeli politics. That's not our role. We'll be partners, we'll support Israel, we'll do a lot of joint projects. In the meantime, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars are being poured into Israel to directly influence the course of Israeli public opinion and politics to be a hardlining conservative country. Now, that's the case. And that's part of what's happening in Israeli politics today, is directly being influenced by a lot of money being poured from the United States and former Russia.
Yeah, on that you are 100% right. In some ways, the Israeli civil discourse as well as politics was hijacked by, you call it hawkish conservatives.
No, I'm calling hardlining conservatives.
Yeah, well, it's right-wingers from North America.
No, that's the mistake, Izhar. It's not right-wingers. I'm a right-winger. You can be a moderate right-winger.
No, not liberal right-wingers. You're right. You're correct.
So
not liberal.
It's not about being in Israel. You cannot use the term right-wingers. The historic mistake that liberals have done, and by the way, the Masorti movement as well has done in the past, is being affiliated mainly with the Israeli left. That's an historic mistake. It's a political mistake, and it's part of the reason why these groups are not influential in Israeli public lives today. And we see all these things that are happening in the Kotel, in the Giyur, in the Kashrut, in everything. And always, people say, well, what can we do? And usually in the last 4 years, they used to come to us and say, well, please help us.
Well, one of the things that would argue with that is the fact that how can you influence without funds? Funds from you legislators in Israel, and funds, you're right, from liberals in North America that should have invested in the liberal camp in Israel, like the more hardline conservatives, as you call them, do in the political arena in Israel. You mentioned the Kotel, Ro'i. We have a question from Heidi Schneider, who is the chairperson of the Masodi Foundation in North America. She asks something that bothers, I think, many of the rabbis and lay leaders who are now on the call regarding the Kotel that you mentioned. Before the last elections, we had a huge Haredi demonstration right in the Rosh Chodesh before the elections to galvanize their troops. Do you think that towards the September coming elections, we will see the Haredi camp reorganizing and again bringing to the streets, to the public sphere, their agenda in even more aggressive way?
No, I don't think so, but it's because they don't need it. These elections have happened because of a struggle between the Haredi camp and Lieberman, and they understand they cannot push too strongly these agendas because they fear the counterattack. So I believe they will be less dominant on these issues because they know that if they will work in the right way, they don't need to make it an agenda in the elections. They make it an agenda after the elections when they will call the shots. It's about being smart and then doing whatever they want and get whatever they want in the Kotel after the election. They don't need to do it before the elections.
When you look at Victor Lieberman's act, do you envy? It's the first politician who was able to say no, both to Netanyahu and to the Haredim.
Well, I always think that we should be independent, and we have done it for 4 years, saying some things yes and some things no, and I appreciate an independent opinion. That's clear. Israel is paying a very heavy price on these elections with regards to trust from the public and financial and others. We have a country that have a lot of issues to attend to, and nothing happens because for almost a year we'll be under elections and discussions around elections. That's a terrible situation. A lot of it will be blamed on Lieberman. It's interesting to see what he will get. I believe he will get a little bit more strength after that, but not dramatically more. And the big question whether there will be a coalition without him the next time. That will be a very strategic issue. The Likud will spend a lot of effort to try and sidetrack him in these elections, to weaken him.
Lieberman declares himself as a Chiloni Yamani, as one could say secular, liberal, right-wingers. You would define yourselves in the same terms or alike. If he offers you to join him for the coming elections, would you consider it?
Well, I'm not at the position now that I'm considering a personal shift. I'm talking at this point on behalf of my party. We have on many issues, like state and religion, connections with him. We are more Masorti in our attitude. Our voters are way more Masorti than Lieberman. That's clear. And I don't like his anti-religious and anti-Haredi, very brutal kind of discourse. That's not our way. Agree that we don't want a halakha state, that's clear, and we don't want a halakha agenda setting the public life in Israel. Clearly, we want every Jewish person to live his life as he chooses, but not the public sphere in Israel to be controlled by halakha issues. That's clear. Mm-hmm. On these issues, we are alike.
What is your prediction regarding the parties who did not pass the threshold? Do you think next elections, who would be harmed more, the right wing or the left wing? Do you think that Bennett will be able to be up, to get more than the threshold and get into the Knesset?
I think it will be a an amazing mistake, an arrogant mistake, if you will run independently again. And I believe that the question now in Israeli politics will be connections and blocks. It will not be around independent runs. I think we will see less of that. And I believe he knows that it will be very dangerous in his behalf to run independently. But I can't speak on behalf of him. He declared that he's reestablishing the new right, as he calls it. I believe it's because he wants connections. I know he wants connections to other parties. I don't know if he will get them. His public image was quite hurt in the last elections. But we are in a historical situation. We never had a situation where we have two election cycles so close to one another, so anything can happen, and the Israeli political system is completely unbalanced at the point.
Yeah. Judy Prince is asking about the Masorti movement. What is your advice to the Masorti conservative movement in Israel that has hundreds of thousands of people in Israel that identify themselves as affiliated with the Masorti movement, yet it seems like that you feel that we made more than one mistake. So what is your advice to us?
It's a fairly easy question. You need to be influential on the discourse and the political system in Israel. If you want your agenda, meaning I would broadly say a more pluralistic attitude towards Judaism and state and religion issues in Israel, you need to find the right leverage in order to influence. Politics is about leverage. If you don't have a leverage and all of your supporters keep figures that speak on behalf of you, your communities, the organizations that you are connected to, mainly are affiliated with the left side, you will not be counted. Clearly, you will not be accounted, and you will not be influential in Israeli discourse. You need to find the right leverage to influence. That's clear. If you want your agenda to influence the way that the Israeli policies are being advanced.
Do you go to a synagogue every so often? And which synagogue do you feel most comfortable in Israel and outside of Israel?
Well, first of all, we have a synagogue in our village, and definitely I go there not rarely. I wouldn't say often, but somewhere in between, especially because that's the center of the community. So because I chose to live in a place where 80% of my neighbors are somewhere on the scope of being religious, on the spectrum, of being religious, and all our community events are in the synagogue, so I am a part of that. And they know that, and sometimes, they see my wife doing jogging on Friday nights before we do Kiddush when they go to the synagogue, and sometimes we meet. We have to represent being ourselves as seculars in our village. That's part of our role. We are expected to be that. So that's our, small ceremonies with our neighbors. So I do go there. I feel very comfortable going to a place, we have a large spectrum people that are very strongly religious in our village here. People that are very open, just come and read. They sit every Shabbat in the synagogue and read novels. I see that as well. They told me yes, that's an option. So I'm examining all options, but I feel very comfortable here as I felt when I was in Boston and Cambridge. The same feeling. It can happen in Israel as well. And by the way, most of my neighbors will not consider themselves Masorti or Reforms. They are Orthodox. Mm-hmm. You will not have, for example, a woman rabbi in our synagogue. That's not agreed in our place, and we have, of course, a separation between men and women in the synagogue. So that's, for example, that was agreed in our village. Although there are people here that think differently.
Until you form another synagogue there, we are counting on you.
So you have learned to know me, that I'm the most important thing in my public life and personal life is meeting people, not a meeting place and not separating places. So I'm very much pro compromise. I believe politics and life is about compromise, not because I'm pro mediocrity. I am for pro excellence, but I believe that in a community you need to compromise. So I'm very open to compromise in order to meet people. That's my lessons from being in the public life in Jerusalem.
Where will we see Roy Folkman in 5 years from now?
Well, whether still in politics or doing something interesting with people, I like to do stuff with interesting people. So I have maybe, and if I will not be in politics, maybe in the academia, I have some ideas and some other things that I'm interested in doing. But at this point, I'm working with Moshe Kahlon. I think these are crucial days in Israeli politics. And as long as I can influence that, I will be a part of that. But maybe in the next few months, I'll find myself outside of the Knesset and, support from the outside, write some policy papers from the outside. I don't know.
Roy, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I wish you all the best, and for sure you had a meaningful role in the outgoing Knesset, and I hope that this challenging days that you are facing will not discourage you not to continue to work in our public sphere. And some of the biggest leaders of the state of Israel had points where they questioned if they chose the right path. And I hope that your decision after this turmoil times will be positive.
Thank you, Ishal. Thank you, and thank you for your sentiment. I appreciate that. And thank you for what you are doing in the Masorti movement. I think your voice is being heard. As I said, I think need more to be heard in the political arena and influence, but definitely your voice is being heard. And I want to thank your community, and I'll be happy to cooperate in the future.
Thank you, Toda Rabba, and I would like to thank our audience, rabbis and lay leaders from all over the world that joined this webinar. JPW is funded by the Masorti Foundation in North America and Canada and other places, and every help would be very much appreciative. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll join again and broadcast again from Jerusalem in our next webinar. תודה רבה וערב טוב מירושלים.
ערב טוב.